Before that, if you want to ask any questions, please ask. As I had said earlier, we'll be discussing, recalling few concepts like about continuity differentiability. I expect you, all of you, remember this, but nevertheless, we can always recall a little bit. Okay. I will not be telling some definitions. I mean, anyway, some continuity definition you already know. So the first is about what we know about continuity on single variable, like function of one variable, single variable calculus. Saying that the function f is continuous at a, and saying that for each unit vector u, a limit t going to 0 plus f of a plus tu equal to fa. Okay. They are the same. Okay, they are equivalent. In other words, what we learned, that the function is continuous at a if the left hand limit and the see, if you take u, there are only two unit vectors in R, u equal to 1 and u equal to -1. So these are the two unit vectors. Okay, so when you take u equal to -1, this will be f of a minus t, and so it basically says left hand limit. And when you take u equal to 1, it says the right hand limit. So the left hand limit of the function equal to fa, the functional value, the right hand limit of the function equal to fa, and that implied continuity. Those two were equivalent in single variable. Okay. If you take Rn, similar things are not equivalent. The function is continuous at a, and you are approaching from each unit vector, approaching from any unit vector. So the set of unit vectors over here is the points on the unit circle, and you are approaching the point from like via all unit vectors, and that is equal to fa. That does not mean that the function is continuous at a. Okay, so that item A and item B are different. Okay, in single variable it is okay, but in more than one variable, in R2 for example, it is not true. One typical example would be one apart from one that I have written over here. One typical example would be something like this. You take a spiral kind of thing. So you take something like this, and then come down, and come close to 0, and then go over and approach to 0 with like this. Okay, so finally like with a slope like tangential to x-axis, go like that. So that what you do on this covered part of the plane, the function you define to be 0, and on the uncovered part of the plane, the function you define 1. Okay, so whenever you approach from any direction, okay, here what is this curve that I have taken? This curve, for example, from here you could see this. Take this as the, you can take this part as the circle with center over here. Okay, so if this is -1, this will be minus half, I mean, and this is 0. Circle of radius 1. That will do, no problem. And rest you like you can take curve or you can take a straight line. That doesn't matter. So whenever you are approaching 0 from any direction, there will come a time when it will pass through the region and it will stay inside the region. Therefore, limit fx t going to 0 ft, that will be 0, because I mean as t goes to 0 in this, like here a is 0 only, so as t goes to 0, I mean I'm taking t u, so you take any u, so this is u if you are u direction. So if you are taking, you take any u direction over here also, after a time it will cross any line, and the only line that it will remain the line, it is the x-axis over here, and on that also after this point the function is 0. Okay, so here also the function is 0, so that will do. From top, I mean you will cross. That's what it is. So what happens now, if you are fixing any direction u and you are trying to approach, you are looking at f of t u, then f of t u becomes 0 after a particular t, and therefore the limit, all of this limit t going to 0 f of t u, this is for each u on the unit circle. So each u not equal to 0 direction vector. However, the function is not continuous at origin, because if you take a neighborhood around origin, if you take any neighborhood around origin, it will contain many points where the functional value is 1, and it will contain also points where the functional value is 0. So you cannot have continuity there. Okay, so continuity in several variables and continuity in single variables are different. However, something is the same, something is common. And what is that? Now that is point C. And what does it say? Now if you have a polynomial in X, in single variable, polynomial in X means X is a single variable, just a polynomial. Q is a polynomial. Then rational functions Px by Qx are continuous wherever defined. Even in several variable also, if you have Px a polynomial, when I am saying Px a polynomial, I would probably be saying it's a polynomial expression in like x1, x2, xn, something like 3 x1 square, x2, x3 minus 5 x2 cube. So it's a polynomial expression involving x1, x2, xn, that kind of a thing. Qx is similar polynomial, and the rational function Px by Qx is continuous wherever they are defined. Okay, so they are the same. That remains, that is the same thing. I mean these are two. I mean this is a statement which was true in single variable, which is true in several variable also. Also, little bit of the thing that item D, even if you have a like function with I mean little more restriction, even if you have a function from R2 to R, saying that at every point A, approaching, if you approach, if you see that the function, the defined at that point, if you are seeing the function uh, over, I mean, okay, let me say this way. At any point A, you consider the line. Remember, when I'm drawing this R2, R2 is my domain. Okay, the function is defined on every point of this R2 function is defined. Now, what you do, you pass through that point parallel to x-axis and pass through that point parallel to y-axis. Okay, and it is given that the function is continuous on these two lines also, the single variable. See, when I'm drawing a line passing through a parallel to x-axis, what do I have? Now I have a single line, and on that the function, single variable function, is continuous. It is given, and on the single line domain that is parallel to y-axis passing through a, that is also there, also the function is continuous. That information is given, and this information is true for every point A. Okay, for every point A. Even then the function need not be continuous. Okay, so that's what it is saying. These are small, I mean, some kind of examples, so you don't need to worry too much about it. Just remember that that our each the way we used to take very comfortably left hand limit and right hand limit kind of thing from single variable, that will not work any further. Okay, don't worry, we don't need that. You probably already know it. Something else. Imagine a polynomial in two variables, fx equal to x1 square plus x1 x2. Okay, so you have fx equal to x1 square plus x1 x2. That's what you have. Okay, now if you want to write a plus h, so a means a1 a2, h means h1 h2. I mean, this is in R2 minus a, then you would probably be writing like a1 plus h1 square plus a1 plus h1 into a2 plus h2 minus a1 square minus a1 a2, and that will of course turn out to be 2a1 h1. a1 square will go away, and you will have h1 square, of course. a1 a2 will go away. Here you will have a1 h2 plus a2 h1 plus h1 h2, and the linear terms in are like this. The linear terms are 2a1 h1 plus a2 h1 plus a1 h2, and then there are some second degree terms, h1 square plus h1 h2. That's what it is. So this I can write, this linear terms I can write in this way, 2a1 plus a2 and then a1 multiplied by h1 h2 plus some second degree terms. Okay, so this one, that is 2a1 plus a2 and a1, this This I call is the coefficient of the linear terms. Of linear terms in where? Now in fa plus h minus fa. That's what I call. Okay. So this is, sometimes I call it the coefficient matrix. Okay. Denoting it by giving a matrix name A. Okay. Consider this kind of a polynomial. Okay. So for example, if I have written fx equal to item C, if I have written fx equal to x1 square minus x1 x2 plus x3 square. Okay. So this is defined on R3. x1 square minus x1 x2 plus x3 square defined on R3. A is equal to 1, 2, 3. Then the coefficient matrix of linear terms in H. So in the expression, this F, so basically fa plus h minus fa is what? Now if I am searching, so basically what I am searching, I am searching the coefficient of, so I mean, the idea is I am searching for the coefficient. So what I am trying to get, now I am trying to get this one. I am trying to get something like this. This first part should be the coefficient of h1. Now coefficient of h1, where will I get? Coefficient of h1 I will get from the first term. Definitely I will get. This will be a1 plus h1 whole square minus a1 square. That's what I will be getting. Okay. So actually here I have taken a1 a2 as such. So I have not substituted 1 2 3. Anyway, so therefore I would be getting a 2a1 from the first term, because I will get a 2a1 h1 from here, and from the second term I will get a coefficient of h1, because the first one will be a1 plus h1 into a2 plus h2. That's what it will give me. So therefore I will get a minus a2 from here, that is h1 into a2, and from nowhere I will get h1 coefficient. And h2 coefficient, where will I get? Now h2 coefficient I will only get from the middle term, and to get h2 coefficient I will only have minus a1 from here, because these two will be looking like minus a1 plus h1 into a2 plus h2, and the coefficient of h2 will be minus a1 only. Okay. And then that is the end of h2 story. And then h3, if I want, then h3 I will get from the third term only. So that would be 2a3. Okay, so that would be the coefficient of the linear terms in the expression fa plus h minus fa. Okay, fine enough. Now what you now come to the general one. Suppose that fx is a polynomial in some x in Rn, n variable. Okay, and suppose that a is a point. Okay, so here a is 1 2 3. I have not substituted 1 2 3, so you forget this one. Okay, so a belongs to Rn. So let a be the coefficient of the linear terms of f of a plus h minus fa. Then limit h norm going to 0, fa plus h minus fa minus ah, absolute value divided by h norm is equal to 0. Well, I mean, this is what? See the fa plus h minus fa. If you write, and then ah is the capital Ah is the linear term. So then what remains? Okay, fa plus h minus fa. if you expand it, what you see that this, and even take out the linear terms. So what is remaining on the top are the higher degree terms. So they are all higher degree terms. And when h norm goes to 0, those higher degree terms divided by h norm, that goes to 0. So all you need to show is that the higher degree terms, that goes to 0. That is, I mean, that is very trivial to show. I have shown it below, but it is very easy. For example, limit h norm going to 0, h1 square by h norm, okay, that goes to 0. That is because you put absolute value over here, that will be less than equal to limit h norm going to 0. You first put the equality, it is okay, or directly you say h1 mod, and that is equal to 0, because h1 mod by h norm is always less than equal to 1. Okay, so the way I am seeing this third inequality is that you write the this expression by h1 by h norm whole absolute value multiplied by h1 absolute value, and then you apply sandwich, and if absolute value goes to 0, that function goes to 0. So that is how it is. Okay. Okay, so what you have found now, if I have a polynomial fx and I collect the coefficient of linear terms, the matrix, the coefficient matrix of linear terms, A, capital A, then I see that this coefficient matrix satisfies a strange condition. And what is the strange property? The property that limit h norm going to 0, fa plus h minus fa minus a times h absolute value by h norm is equal to 0. So based on that, actually, those who realize this basically means that you are trying to approximate the functional value at a plus h by the linear function fa plus h. Okay. So this is how the derivative of a function from Rn to R defined. Suppose that E is an open subset of Rn, and f is given to be like given a function from E to R, and A is a point of E. Suppose that there is a matrix, that type of the coefficient matrix that we saw, 1 by n means row matrix, such that limit h going to 0, fa plus h minus fa minus ah absolute value by h norm is equal to 0. Then we say that f is differentiable at A, and we call this row matrix A as the derivative. Okay, f dash A is equal to A. So essentially, for polynomials that we found out this coefficient of linear terms, they are actually the derivative. Okay. And then some text would call this f dash A as total derivative, and since f dash A is treated as a row vector, by saying the gradient fa, it is the column vector, the transpose of it. Okay, so grad f, when we say grad f, we treat it as a proper vector. Vector means a column vector. Okay, so for example, if you take fxyz as x square plus y square plus xyz, then what is f dash xyz? Now f dash xyz is equal to 2x plus yz y plus xz xy. Okay, that is this thing. This is the like you can take this one and substitute here and see that is happening. Or because fxyz is a polynomial, you can compute the coefficient of the linear terms, because of that. So if you are talking about at a point x, y, z, then the coefficient of linear term will be twice x from here, and x plus h, from x plus h you will get a coefficient yz, h into yz, that you will get. So that's why you are getting twice x plus yz. Okay, yeah, no problem for polynomials. And what we already know, so I will also come back to this after a little bit of time. What about directional derivatives? uh, these are about slopes. uh, on your road, on your way to school, uh, assume that the height of the road increases and the road goes as if it is the line fx equal to x. That means you are going to school and the the height of the road, so this is the road, this is how it is increasing. Okay, so then what is the slope of the road? So while going to school you would say, okay, slope is 1, it is increasing. Okay, the height is increasing. Okay, and when you are coming back, what is the slope? uh, then you would say it is -1. So what you are saying, it's not about the line, it is also about the direction that you are talking. In one direction it is 1, in one direction it is -1. Okay, so the slope that in single variable we talked about, it is always taking it is always with respect to the direction vector 1, u equal to 1. That is the direction vector. Okay, so here if you, depending on the direction vector, the directional derivative is defined as du at uh, at a point, like the directional derivative with respect to f at a point a, so that is as it is written, limit t going to 0. Remember, it is t going to 0 and u is fixed, u is the vector. Okay, sometimes it is called a direction vector. By saying a direction vector, we basically mean a non-zero vector. Any non-zero vector is treated as a direction. Okay, so that is the directional derivative. When you take u equal to 1 in single variable, this is your definition of derivative. Okay, that's what I said. But if you take u equal to -1, every slope that you have got in your single variable will be negative. It will be its opposite. Okay, of course it means the like this is the physical interpretation. Instantaneous rate of change of f. Okay, unit steps means u. So for example, if you take fx yz equal to x square plus y square plus xyz, a equal to this, u equal to this, v equal to this, then you have du fa. Well, you directly get it from the definition itself. Substitute f of a plus du minus fa, limit t going to 0, you get this. Okay, this is from the definition, no problem. When u is the positive uh, unit vector, that is the along the axis, then the du fa is called the partial derivative, and they are defined they are denoted by difa. I will be using this repeatedly. Okay, and the bracket a means dif, the ith derivative, I mean ith partial derivative evaluated at a. Okay, some facts that we already know. Suppose that du f a is equal to beta and alpha is not equal to 0, then d of alpha u fa exists and d of alpha u fa is alpha times DUFA. Okay, that can be shown. If you do not know how to show, you can show like it has been shown. You already know it. I have just written it. In case you have forgotten, you can have a look at it. Second fact, suppose I have a function from Rn to R and DUFA exists for each non-zero u. Even then, the function need not be continuous. Okay, so that's fine. The function will not be continuous. The same this thing example that I did, that spiral kind of an example, that will do, because when you approach, okay, from any direction, after a particular time the function is 0, therefore the rate of change, I mean the directional derivative will be 0, but even then the function is not continuous, as we showed there in the previous example. Okay, what other facts? Suppose that you have a function from Rn to, I mean R. We are only talking about the real valued function on Rn. So continuous at A, then it is not necessary that the any directional derivative will exist, not even for a single direction. Oh, it will not exist. I mean, you can take the fx equal to x mod kind of this thing, or you take a cone kind of a thing. So take something like this and then rotate it on R2. So you have your plane something like this. So this is origin, and on here what you do, you rotate this thing. Okay, so at this point, if you take any direction along any direction, so essentially what along any direction means, what along any line you consider the function on that line, along any line on the of the domain that passes through this point. It basically means you are considering on this single line domain what is the function, and the function will look like mod x, the graph of mod x. Okay, so the directional derivative will not exist. Okay, no problem. I mean, these are some not so interesting, but to some people interesting examples. You don't like it, forget it. Okay, suppose that E is an open subset of Rn. Every time we will be taking E in all these texts, mostly it is E and it stands for open subset. So be a little bit careful. And suppose that you have a real valued function defined on E, and you have a direction U, and suppose that f dax A, the function is differentiable at A, and f dax A equal to this. Remember, what is the definition of f dax A? Now, f dax A is that if there is a row vector such that this limit h norm going to 0, f of A plus h minus f A minus capital A into h absolute value divided by h norm is equal to 0. If there exists one capital A row vector, then we call that is the derivative. So this is that the derivative. Okay. Now when such the function is differentiable, f is continuous at A, and in fact, in that case, DUFA, the directional derivative will always exist, and it is actually equal to the inner product of the gradient FA and U. Okay, DUFA is equal to grad FA inner product U. So in particular, DIFA is equal to DI. DI means the ith element of the row vector A. This one This one has a nice interpretation in terms of the human aspiration to approximate functions by, I mean, arbitrary functions, some by linear functions. You will, but that's a different thing. So how do you verify that whether a function is differentiable at a point or not? Now, it is very simple. All I have to do is I will try to find out all. So because of this above fact, so this above fact gives you a technique. So all you have to do is you try to find out the partial derivatives, that is the directional derivatives with respect to the positive unit coordinate axis, so vectors on that coordinate axis. And if some of them do not exist, then you say the function is not differentiable. If all of them exist, then you take capital A to be those elements, d1fa, dnfa, all of them. And then you substitute it in the definition and check the limit is equal to 0. If the limit is equal to 0, then you say, yes, this is differentiable and this is derivative. Otherwise, you conclude no. So for example, you take this function and then d1f00, d2f00, then we took the limit. This is, you can say h going to 0 also. I mean, that is okay. H norm going to 0. This does not exist, so therefore it is not differentiable. Not a big thing. A sufficient condition for differentiability. Remember that thing. So till now, what you remember? You remember that if the a function is differentiable, then the partial derivatives must exist, and partial derivative, ith partial derivative must be the ith element of the derivative, that is of the derivative row matrix. Okay, ith element of that. Okay, a sufficient condition, what it says now, if you have an open set and suppose that the ith partial derivatives are continuous functions on E, on that open set E, then the function is differentiable on E. This condition is not necessary. You can see many examples. Okay, you try practicing fxy equal to two variable function minimum xy, check the directional derivative and differentiability, and then fxy equal to minimum x square y square. You can try practicing these things. Okay, we have some more things to tell. Okay, the higher order derivatives. How do we define the higher order derivatives? Now suppose that E is an open subset of Rn. Okay, then we say f is continuously differentiable on E. Okay, f is from E to R. It is a real valued function. For most of these things, if you want, you can imagine an open subset of R2 itself on your table or something. You can draw a region and exclude the boundary so that it remains open, and assume that you have at every point you have given some height. So that's your real valued, the height is your real valued function. Okay, so if you have nicely given that that heights, and the height would look like some waved kind of roof or something like that. Okay, so those are nice, these things, and then you can try to imagine things. Okay, so if the partial derivatives are continuous, over this whole region, because each partial derivative will be again a function. Okay, then the function is said to be continuously differentiable. That is all. Partial derivatives are continuous, function is said to be continuously differentiable. Okay, how do you define what do you like the higher order derivatives? The higher order or like higher order derivatives are defined very in the simple way, Aij Dij f. This basically means defined to be di ith partial derivative of dj of f. So you take f, take its partial derivative with respect to xj, whatever you get, take its partial derivative with respect to xi. So that is dijf. In general, dijf and djif, uh, they both may exist, and they may be unequal also. Okay. But what is known is that if dijf and djif are both continuous on E, where E is open, then dijf is equal to djif. Okay, the mixed partial derivatives are all the same. Fine, you will be freely using that part. I am sure you knew this. Okay. What is twice continuously differentiable function? A function is said to be twice continuously differentiable function. In the same way, we said continuously differentiable function if all the second order partial derivatives are continuous. So that is the thing. All dijf are continuous on E. So then we say the function is twice continuously differentiable function. Typical class of functions that are very nice is that all polynomials are infinitely differentiable functions. All polynomials that you can write in x1 to xn, whatever you can write, they are all infinitely differentiable functions. Okay. This definition of Hessian definition, you probably already know, but it is better to write. This is the matrix. Hessian is calculated, computed at a point A. Suppose that you have a twice continuously differentiable function. So sometimes we call it C2 function. Okay, twice continuously differentiable function, and then Hessian uh, is defined by taking all these second order derivatives. So what you do, d11, d12, d1n, d21, d22, d2n, dn1, dn2, dnn, this. And because it is a C2 function, so therefore d1n and dn1, they are the same. So essentially this is a symmetric, a real symmetric matrix. Okay. And so whether you write d11, d21, dn1 in the row, you will get the same thing. Okay. So this is the Hessian matrix. For example, if you take the function f of xyz, fxyz, this is f of xyz, r3 to r, as exponential x plus y minus x into y into z. At the point 1, 1, 0, we could try to compute the this thing, Hessian, then you get this. For example, if you want to get the 2 to 2th entry, so that basically means dy, you have to take partial derivatives with respect to y twice. If you want to take partial derivative with respect to y twice, then the second term will give you 0, because in the first term that has only y, not y square. Okay, so that will give you 0, and then this one will give you again this exponential x plus y, and the point a is 1, 1, 0, so therefore you will get a square. Okay. For example, the one third term, so then one third term is what? Now with respect to x and with respect to, first take with respect to x, then take with respect to z. In any case, the first one will give you 0, because the moment you are taking with respect to z, it will give you 0. And the third one will give you with respect to x, it will be yz, with respect to z, it will be minus y, and it is 1, 1, 0, so minus 1. So that's how you compute the Hessian. So you probably will compute more quicker than me. Okay. So now we will come to something that is more relevant. Everything is relevant, but slowly recalling all these things. We used to learn Rolle's theorem. Rolle's theorem we have learned from our +2 days when you probably are preparing for JEE, and then even after the +2 days, Rolle's theorem was told. Simple. And because of Rolle's theorem, using the Rolle's theorem, you could prove the generalized mean value theorem as this. And using generalized mean value theorem, you could prove the Taylor's theorem in one variable, which basically says if you have a Cn function that is nth continuously, n time continuously differentiable function in open set. Suppose E subset of R is open and F is n time continuously differentiable on E, and assume that the interval A and A plus X closed interval, it is there inside E. Then there exists a T from A, I mean between A and A plus X in the open interval A and A plus X, such that f of A plus X, so basically it says this one, f of A plus X is equal to fa. You remember this one, everybody remembers this one very nicely. Okay, f dash A X plus, many people write it this way and remember it this way, f double dash A, and like this, and you go up to x power n minus 1 by n minus 1 factorial f n minus 1 nth derivative A, plus there is a last term x power n divided by n factorial and nth derivative of t, where t, remember, lies between A and A plus X. Okay, that's the Taylor's theorem in one variable. And using Taylor's theorem in one variable, okay, the proof of Taylor theorem, if you do not recall, like it is noted below there, it just uses very cleverly uses the generalized mean value theorem. The proof of generalized mean value theorem comes from Rolle's theorem. Okay, so it's written over there. If you want to see, you can see. But that's in one variable. What is more interesting? The more interesting thing is the Taylor's theorem in many variables. So what is that? Suppose that E subset of Rn is open, and suppose that I have a function which is m times continuously differentiable, and the same situation, you have a point A and the interval A to A plus, closed interval A to A plus X. When I am saying closed interval A to A plus X, this is an interval like thing. It's a line segment in Rn. Okay. Then this one says the very similar thing. It says there exists a T belonging to 0, 1 such that f of A plus X is equal to f of A plus summation difa xi. Okay, this one. Summation dif, the partial derivatives you into xi, okay, plus summation, this is I, this is just one I, then you have ij dij f at A xi xj, and it is 1 by 2 factorial. Like this, it will go up to m minus 1. Since I am talking about Cm function, it will go up to this much, m minus 1, this thing, and only at the end term it will be f of A plus Tx. Okay, I mean, while finding out the last term, it is f of A plus Tx. That's how it goes. For example, the first three terms of the Taylor expansion of the function sin x y about 0 0. Okay, so the first three terms would be like this: f0 plus dx f0 x plus dy f0 y plus 1 by 2 factorial. This is dxx f0 into xx. Okay, that's how dxy f0 into this dyx. This ij, these are all I ranging from 1 to n, j ranging from 1 to n. Anything can come. So ij, so like for example 1 to 2 1 both can come. Okay, that's how it is. Okay. Another form of Taylor's theorem, like you pay attention on this page because this is what we are going to use. Another form of Taylor's theorem is like it will go up to this 1 by m factorial di1 to im, and this one f, instead of evaluating this as a plus tx, it will evaluate at a. Okay, it will evaluate at a, but then it will keep a remainder term rx, where rx by x norm power m goes to 0 as x norm goes to 0. Okay, it is the same thing. fa plus x is equal to fa plus di fa xi plus 1 by 2 factorial dij fa xi xj up to the mth factorial. Okay, so instead of xm by m factorial, remember there you only had one x, so xi1 xim all of them are the same, so that's why you used to have x power m by m factorial. Anyway, and then this is the remainder term, where the remainder term divided by x norm power m limit is 0. What does it mean? In words, it means the remainder term is of higher degree than mth degree, x norm power m. So it appears like it goes to 0. Okay, when you divide it by x norm power m, so it goes to 0 even more quickly. Okay, that's what it is. So yeah, like you can see these things, the proofs over here if you want to read. If I want to tell you, this proof is nice if you try to read. Okay, maybe I should tell these two things I will tell and then I will stop. The more useful thing, okay, is that the second degree, both the facts that I told earlier, both of them, they are second degree this thing. So if I have a twice continuously differentiable function on E, and I have an interval over there. Remember, when I'm saying interval, it basically means closed line segment. So then fa plus x is equal to fa. This one is grad fa x basically means d1 fa x1 plus d2 fa x2. This essentially means that d1 fa x1 plus that the first term that I had written, d2f evaluated at a x2. This is this one, and this one half means 1 by 2 factorial x transpose hax. This is actually this part is actually what, 1 by 2 factorial, and then you have d11 f evaluated at a x1 plus d12 evaluated at a x1 x2 plus d21 evaluated at f a x2 x1 plus d22 evaluated at f a x2 x2. But this is actually what, none this is nothing but if you write d11 d12 d21 d22, everywhere assume you have written f f f f and you multiply it by x1 x2. Multiply means you just write the expression. I am just trying to write the expression. Then what will happen, you will have d11 f multiplied by x1 square, d12 f will get multiplied by x1. From here, from right side, it will get multiplied by x2. And similarly, d21f will be from left hand side, it will get multiplied by x2, and from right hand side it will get multiplied by x1. So essentially that is that, and then you have half sitting over here. That's what it is. And here it is the second degree approximation. So in one you have a plus tx evaluated at a plus tx where t belongs to 0 1. In the other one it is just that, and with rx, okay, where rx by x norm square goes to 0. So it comes from the previous two. The Taylor series, essentially it is that the symbol Taylor series of f in x about a. So it will be fa plus the first derivatives and then x minus a into I, and here x minus a ith coordinate, x minus a jth coordinate. The way you used to write xi xj, it means x minus a ith term and x minus a jth coordinate, you can say. That's better, dijk. So that's the Taylor series. In order to define a Taylor series, the function needs to be given, the function given should be infinitely differentiable. Okay, for example, you can define your Taylor series like this. So suppose that I have given fyz equal to y square z4 plus yz cube minus 5yz plus 6, and a given to be 1 2, and I want to look at the Taylor series of this and find the coefficient Taylor series. A is given this 1 2, and I want to find the coefficient of y minus 1 square into z minus 2 square in the Taylor series. So I can find it in two different ways. So apply Taylor's theorem if you want. So what I have to do now, y minus 1 z minus 2 I want to do. So w I have to write like yz minus 1 2 in that way. And I want the coefficient of y minus 1 whole square, z minus 2 whole square, and the terms that kind of a term can only come from the first term, y square z4. The others cannot contribute those kind of term. And if I want to have that kind of a term, y square z4, then I have to select y minus 1 square, both of them, and from z minus z4 I have to select z minus 2 square, some two j's I have to select from there. Okay, so then terms with degree 4 can only occur in that way. 1 by 4 factorial ijkl, that is 1 2. So the fourth derivative, and wi wj wk wl, and two of them have to be y minus 1 and two of them have to be z minus 2. Okay, that's how I can get y minus 1 whole square and z minus 2 whole square. And so that will be 4 choose 2 way. Okay, in that way it can be done. Therefore the coefficient would be something like, and each of those places this dijkl, so that will turn out to be d11 d22, I mean d1122. So that will be this coefficient and it should be 24. Okay, that's how it is. The moment see 1 by 4 factorial 4 choose 2, so that will be this much. 1 by 4 factorial 4 choose 2 is 1 by 2 factorial 2 factorial, then d1122 fa computed, this is this much, so you get 24. Otherwise you just fyz, because it is a polynomial, you write y minus 1 plus 1 z minus 2 plus 2 and try to imagine the coefficient of y minus 1 square, so you will get a y minus 1 square from here, and you want a z minus 2 square from here, but this is power 4. By binomial theorem, you will get 4 choose 2 z minus 2 whole square into 2 square, that is the coefficient. Okay, so the coefficient would be y minus, so the term would be y minus 1 square, then 4 choose 2, and then z minus 2 square into 2 square. That's what will happen. Okay, so that's what, and like, so the required coefficient would be 4 choose 2 into 2 squares, and that's 4 factorial. Okay, so that's 24. So that is how you will get it. This is a notation. You can use d alpha x alpha. That's why if you take alpha to be index, then it is easier to remember that Taylor series of f in x about a. So the coefficient of x power alpha is 1 by alpha factorial d alpha fa. This is easier to remember. Okay, easy to remember. Okay, I will stop here. Go and I mean, you have to go through it just to remember. Yep. You can go now. Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Audible. Sir, I wanted to ask something. I mean, you said there was there can be a function who has like some point a and derivative exists at that point, but function is not continuous at that point. Like, how is that possible?
What did I say?
That